On Thanksgiving, my uncle stood in the doorway and told me, "You're not family anymore, get out." Behind him, I caught my mom laughing as she gave my seat to my sister's boyfriend. My name is Oliver and I'm 28. For most of my life, I was practically invisible in my own family. You know the type, the one everyone forgets to text, who gets left out of group photos. The one they remember only when they need a favor or a ride, but never when it really counted. I grew up with a mom who had a cutting remark for every occasion, and a memory that worked in mysterious ways. She'd meticulously recall every mistake I ever made, yet somehow conveniently forget every award, every time I helped her, every birthday card I'd painstakingly saved to buy. Then there's my sister Ava. She quickly learned that playing the perfect child was her golden ticket. She'd smile, act demure, ace her grades, and in return she was treated like royalty. I was her exact opposite. Quiet, naturally skeptical, and often a little too honest for my own good. That didn't exactly fit our family's vibe. Where a forced smile was currency and genuine truth was often seen as an annoyance. For years, I truly tried to earn my spot. I'd show up to dinners I wasn't invited to with homemade pies, bring thoughtful gifts to birthdays where no one seemed to notice my arrival, and offer compliments to relatives who consistently mispronounced my name. Initially, I played along, foolishly believing that if I just tried hard enough, they'd eventually see me. But by the time I turned 25, the illusion completely shattered. I realized my efforts were futile. My place at their table was never going to be truly secure. Yet, there's a persistent ache that lingers, no matter how rationally you understand the situation. So, when Thanksgiving rolled around last year, I debated whether to even bother going. My cousin Maya was the only person in that entire complicated family who treated me like an actual human being. She was 2 years younger but possessed more emotional maturity than half the adults in the room. We'd grown closer over the years, exchanging DMs, having occasional late-night calls, and genuinely checking in on each other. So when her text popped up the day before Thanksgiving, "You better show up. I saved you a spot, you know," I caved. I figured maybe, if only for her, it was worth giving it another shot. I drove the 40 minutes to my uncle's house, where Thanksgiving was always hosted. It was classic suburbia. A meticulously manicured lawn, a rather tacky inflatable turkey on display, and that unmistakable aroma of butter, spices, and an underlying tension wafting from the open windows. I parked in my usual spot, 3 houses down, because my uncle's driveway was inevitably full whenever I arrived late. As I approached the front steps carrying a bottle of wine I knew no one would touch, I saw them through the screen door. My mom, my aunt, my sister, my uncle, all laughing, chatting, and smiling as if posing for a photo shoot of Dysfunctional Families Anonymous. I didn't expect a grand entrance or even a warm greeting. But what happened next wasn't merely cold. It was undeniably deliberate. Just as my hand reached for the doorknob, the door opened a crack. My Uncle Ron stood there, filling the frame like a human roadblock. He offered no greeting, no smile. He simply stared at me with that familiar smug little twitch in his mouth and said, "You're not family anymore, Oliver. You need to leave." First, I actually thought he was joking. I even let out a small laugh, waiting for the punchline. But he didn't move. Behind him, I saw my mom pass 2 plates across the table, one of them bearing a name card I recognized as mine. "Mine," she declared, handing it with a laugh to Ava's boyfriend, a guy I'd only met twice. They clinked glasses. My chair, my seat, was filled before I even had a chance to step inside. "I'm serious, Oliver," Uncle Ron added. "Your presence just creates tension." I blinked. "Causes tension?" I repeated, dumbfounded. "I haven't even walked in yet." He gave a mock sympathetic shrug. "Let's not make this worse than it needs to be. Just head home, okay?" I looked over his shoulder, locking eyes with my mom. She didn't flinch. She didn't call him off. She simply raised an eyebrow and took a sip of her wine, as if watching a mildly amusing TV show. For a brief moment I considered fighting back, raising my voice, creating a scene. But I didn't. Instead, I did something that even caught me by surprise. I nodded calmly, quietly. I stepped back. I walked down those steps, the same bottle of wine still clutched in my hand, got into my car and drove 2 blocks before pulling over. My hands were trembling, not from rage, but from something colder, something profoundly final. I had seen all I needed to see. I wasn't family to them. I was a placeholder, a running joke, a convenient scapegoat when they needed someone to criticize, and an empty chair they could fill when they chose. But here's the thing. I had a secret they knew nothing about. For months, I'd been quietly preparing for the exact moment I stopped trying. Maya and I had discussed it more than once during whispered calls and shared stories of being left out, overlooked, and consistently dismissed. She wasn't as vocal about it, but she saw it too, the hypocrisy, the blatant favoritism, the subtle manipulation that permeated every family gathering. She once told me, if we ever wanted to shatter this illusion, all it would take is one spark. So I picked up my phone, opened the saved message. It had taken me weeks to craft, to time it just right. It wasn't a rant, a guilt trip, or some elaborate attempt at closure. It was simply the unvarnished truth laid bare, sent to a very select group of people in that house. And I hit send. 5 minutes later, still parked at the corner of their street, engine idling, I watched through my rearview mirror. The front door opened. First, Maya stormed out, her face flushed with anger. Then my cousin Daniel, followed by his girlfriend, and then my aunt's best friend, the one who always brought dessert and had a soft spot for me. One by one they left. I couldn't make out the shouting inside, but I could easily guess. The illusion was cracking, and that was just the very beginning. Maya was the first to call. Her name flashed across my screen before I even pulled out of my spot. I answered, my heart pounding, not from nervousness, but because I hadn't expected things to unravel so quickly. Oliver, she snapped, not even waiting for me to speak. What did you just do? I paused. You read it. Of course I read it. So did everyone else. Uncle Ron's face turned purple. Your mom tried to play dumb. And Ava just stood there frozen, like she didn't know what planet she was on. I could hear the wind rushing past her phone. She was walking fast, maybe pacing, maybe already on her way to her car. Maya was quiet for a second, and when she spoke again, her voice had dropped. Why didn't you tell me you were recording them? That was the crucial detail. A few months prior, after years of being talked down to, dismissed, and lied about behind my back, I'd started collecting receipts. Not out of paranoia, but because I was utterly exhausted by the gaslighting. I'd record casual conversations, save texts, take screenshots. I had video clips of my mom telling Ava she should take credit for something I'd done. A voice memo of Uncle Ron claiming I only showed up to family events for handouts, even though I'd never once asked for anything. And perhaps the most damning, an audio recording from my birthday the year before, when they forgot I existed even though I had been sitting right there at the table. That Thanksgiving message I sent wasn't just a note. It was a carefully compiled greatest hits of family hypocrisy, stitched together into a 5-minute clip. It had context, timestamps, and just enough raw silence between the insults to let it all sink in. I'd sent it to 7 people. Maya, Daniel, my Aunt Laura, my cousin's fiancé, my mom's sister, who had always been on the fence, and 2 family friends who had always believed the carefully curated version of the family my mother and Uncle Ron sold as gospel truth. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you caught in the middle, I said quietly. Maya scoffed. I'm already in the middle, but I'm glad you did it. I exhaled, my grip on the steering wheel finally loosening. Are you okay? I will be, she replied. I'm done with them. Click. I sat there in the silence of my car, staring out the windshield, watching as more cars began pulling away from the house. A few people stood on the porch, looking utterly bewildered. My mom's voice rose above them all. She was shouting something I couldn't quite make out, but I didn't need to hear the specific words. I'd heard versions of them my entire life. The next call came from Aunt Laura. Oliver, she said, breathless. Where are you? I considered lying. Down the street. Stay there. I'm coming. She hung up, and true to her word, 5 minutes later, she climbed into my passenger seat. Her eyes were wide, but not with anger. More like someone who had just stumbled into an unexpected crime scene. I listened to everything, she said twice. I remained silent. I never knew it was that bad. I mean, I knew they were cruel sometimes, but I just didn't realize how calculated it all was. I looked over at her. You really didn't know? She winced. I saw pieces, but your mom always made it seem like you were the problem. She said you were dramatic, that you twisted things. I didn't want to believe she'd lie. She didn't lie, I said softly. She edited. Aunt Laura stared at the dashboard. This is going to rip the family apart. Then maybe it was already broken, I replied. That evening I returned home to a flood of messages. Some angry, some apologetic, a few confused. But what stood out most was the deafening silence from the people who should have said something. My mom, Ava, and Uncle Ron. Not one of them reached out, not even a call, not a single word. Until the next morning. That's when I saw the post. My mother, in her usual performative style, had posted a lengthy status on Facebook about betrayal, misunderstandings, and private matters being aired for attention. She never said my name, but the comments made it abundantly clear who she was talking about. People offered sympathy, called me disrespectful, said things like, "You raised him better than that, girl." But then, something unexpected happened in the comment thread. Maya commented, "So did Daniel." Then Aunt Laura. One by one, people began pushing back. They called out the manipulation, the blatant double standards, even sharing their own stories of being mistreated or lied to. The thread exploded. Some relatives deleted their comments. A few blocked me outright, but the tide had irrevocably shifted. For once I wasn't alone. For once people saw it too. That weekend, I got a message request from Ava's boyfriend. It read, "I didn't know they were like that. I'm sorry. If I'd known what I was taking part in, I would have never sat in your chair." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The message had already been sent, and not just the one in the group chat. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own story. I felt like the author. And that story, it wasn't finished yet. The Sunday after Thanksgiving, I heard a knock at my door. I live in a quiet part of town, nothing fancy. Just a modest apartment above a bakery that perpetually smells like cinnamon rolls. It's peaceful, quiet, nothing like the house I grew up in, where every door slam felt like a gunshot and every holiday dinner was a performance for the neighbors. I wasn't expecting visitors. Most of my friends had already texted me after the video went around, some supportive, some shocked. Maya had been calling me daily, but I wasn't prepared to open the door and see my dad. We hadn't spoken in almost a year. He looked older than I remembered, more gray in his beard, that familiar leather jacket a little more worn. He didn't smile. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, rocking slightly on his heels as if searching for words. "Hi," he finally muttered. "Didn't expect to see you," I said, stepping aside, but not exactly offering a warm welcome. He hesitated, then walked in. I watched him scan the apartment, clean, quiet, filled with small things that made me happy. The records on the shelf, the stack of books I actually had time to read now, the framed photo of Maya and me from the one Thanksgiving we snuck out for burgers instead of enduring the family circus. "I saw the video," he said. "Or clips of it. Your aunt sent it to me." I waited. He sat on the edge of my couch, staring at the floor as if it held the answers he didn't know how to ask for. "Your mom. She's been losing her mind over this. Says you set her up. Says you twisted everything." I leaned against the counter. Did I? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he rubbed the bridge of his nose, as if trying to press the tension out through his skin. "I don't know, Oliver. I mean, I knew things were bad between you two, but hearing it like that, it was hard to listen to." I folded my arms. "Hard for who?" He looked up at me. "Because it made me realize I let it happen for years." And there it was. The first truly honest sentence my father had ever spoken that felt like a mirror, not a dismissal. I said nothing, not trusting myself to speak yet. He shifted on the couch. "You remember when you were 13 and your mom threw out your art portfolio?" I nodded slowly. That day had stayed with me. Months of work, tossed into the trash because I'd gotten an AB in science. "Yeah. She told me you'd drawn something disrespectful." I drew a cartoon of her yelling at me. That was it. He let out a dry laugh. I believed her. Never even asked to see it. "That was the pattern," I said, surprised at how steady my voice was. She'd say something. You'd nod. Ava would play along. And I'd be left trying to figure out if I was crazy, or just not worth the truth. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. Instead, he sat there, nodding slightly, letting the silence stretch. "I can't fix what happened," he said eventually. "But I wanted you to know. I see it now. I wish I'd said something sooner. I wish I'd stepped in." I believed he meant it. I really did. But part of me also knew that his regret didn't undo years of complicity. He hadn't been cruel, but he'd been silent. And sometimes silence is just a different kind of wound. I appreciate you saying that, I said. But I don't know what you want from me. He exhaled. I don't know either. I guess I wanted to see how you're doing. I'm doing better, I said truthfully. Now that I'm out of it, now that I've stopped pretending they'll change. He nodded again. They're planning damage control. Of course they are. They think if they just wait it out, people will move on. I raised an eyebrow. And will they? He looked tired. Some already have. Some are scared to pick sides. But a few they're furious. Especially with what you said about the money. That part. What I hadn't mentioned to anyone outside that original message was the money trail. I had been quietly providing financial support to several family members for years. Rent, car repairs, even a small loan to Ava once when she claimed her boyfriend was abusive and she needed to leave. I never asked for it back. Never told anyone. I did it because I thought maybe, just maybe, it would earn me a place in the family again. That stopped 3 months ago. I didn't make a scene about it. I simply started redirecting my help toward Maya, toward friends, toward people who actually treated me like a person. The video I sent out included a note at the end. This is why I stopped paying for your lives. Apparently, that stung more than the audio clips. They're saying you're punishing them, my dad said. They punished themselves, I replied. I just stopped rewarding it. He didn't argue. After a while he stood. I should go. I just wanted you to know you were right about all of it. He started toward the door, then paused. If there's ever a way back for us, I hope you'll let me take it. And then he left. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stood there in the quiet, wondering how long it would take for the next wave to hit, because I knew the family wasn't done yet. My mom didn't relinquish power that easily. Ava never handled humiliation well. And Thanksgiving might have been the spark, but Christmas was around the corner. If they thought they could pretend nothing had changed, they were about to be reminded. I hadn't even started yet. By the time December rolled around, the silence was deafening. The group chat for family Christmas plans, which usually buzzed with potluck assignments and recycled memes from Aunt Margie, was eerily quiet. The last message in there was Maya's. Let me know when you all are ready to take some accountability. No one responded. No haha reactions, no snide remarks. Just a vacuum of guilt pretending to be peace. I wasn't invited, of course. Not that I needed the invite. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was missing something. I didn't need to force a smile through another dinner where Ava's career was celebrated like a Nobel Prize and mine was ignored. I didn't need to listen to my mom laugh at jokes about me or hear Uncle Ron say things like, Oliver's always been sensitive. As if I were some malfunctioning appliance. I was free now. Free from obligation, from expectation, from the heavy weight of being the family's emotional punching bag. But I wasn't done. Not yet. You see, the recording I sent out at Thanksgiving was just the beginning. It had shaken their image, forced conversations they didn't want to have. But it hadn't truly compelled them to change. They were hiding now, licking their wounds, waiting for the drama to pass. I could sense it. That smug, simmering belief that eventually I'd fade from memory and they'd reclaim the narrative. So I made sure they couldn't. I started with the money. Quietly, methodically, and without warning, I called in the favors. That $3,000 loan to Ava? I sent her a formal letter through my lawyer, reminding her that while I had originally treated it as a gift, the recent revelation of her lies about escaping an abusive relationship voided that understanding. She was still with the guy, by the way. He showed up to Thanksgiving in my seat, laughing with my mom. I gave her 60 days to repay. No threats, no interest, just a paper trail. I canceled the recurring bank transfer that had been covering part of Uncle Ron's property tax. He never asked for help directly. He was too proud for that. But a few years ago he hinted at tough times and I stepped in. Every November, like clockwork, I'd send the amount due. Not this year. On December 3rd, his bank declined the payment request. My mom, though, she was the biggest one. For 5 years, I'd been covering the lease on her car. She never thanked me, not once. It was simply expected. She made it clear that as her son, it was my duty. I let it slide for too long. She didn't know the car was still in my name. On December 10th, I repossessed it. The phone calls came in like fireworks. First, Ava, shrill and furious. Then, Uncle Ron trying to reason with me as if I were some angry child. And finally, my mother. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just called and said, "So this is who you really are?" And I replied, "No, this is who you made me become." Click. Christmas Eve arrived. I didn't sit alone. I spent it with Maya and a few of our mutual friends. We cooked dinner together in her apartment, lit candles, played board games, and exchanged gifts that didn't need to impress anyone. It was the warmest holiday I'd had in years. Around midnight, Maya poured us each a glass of wine and sat beside me on the floor, pulling a blanket over our legs. "They called me," she said softly. "Let me guess," I said. "Damage control." She nodded. "Your mom said I was choosing sides. That I was tearing the family apart." "You are," I said. "The part that needed to be torn down." She leaned her head on my shoulder. She also said something else. That she was going to set the record straight. I sighed. Of course she is. The next morning I found out what she meant. My mom wrote another lengthy post on Facebook. Another performance. Another attempt to flip the script. She talked about how families endure hard times, how sometimes private pain becomes public, and how some members are easily manipulated by false narratives. It was a masterclass in polished denial. No names, no specifics, just enough ambiguity to draw sympathy from people who only knew the version of her she'd curated for years. I didn't respond. I didn't comment. I didn't need to because by then the truth was already spreading on its own. Aunt Laura posted her own status. Short but pointed. "Sometimes the only way to fix a broken family is to stop pretending it's not broken. Proud of you, Oliver." Daniel posted a screenshot of one of the texts my mom had sent him years ago, bad-mouthing me right after I helped him pay for college books. The caption was simple. "We all saw it. We just didn't want to admit it." More and more people, cousins, old family friends, even one of Ava's college roommates, began commenting, messaging, reaching out. People I hadn't spoken to in years were apologizing, telling me they'd noticed things but hadn't realized how deep it went. It was like lifting the lid off a pressure cooker. Everyone had stories. Everyone had scars. And now they weren't afraid to share them. A week after Christmas, I got a letter in the mail handwritten from my mom. It wasn't an apology. It was a warning. She said I was destroying the family's reputation, that I was making enemies I couldn't afford, that there were consequences to embarrassing people in public. It read like the desperate final act of someone who had lost control and didn't know how else to claw it back. I folded the letter once and dropped it in the trash. I didn't need to fight her anymore. The truth was winning on its own. By the time New Year's Eve rolled around, the family had split into two distinct camps. There were the ones who clung to the old ways, defending my mom, pretending the recordings were taken out of context, dismissing every call-out as drama. And then there were the ones who finally opened their eyes. They started organizing their own gatherings. Maya hosted a brunch in January and invited everyone she trusted. Over 20 people showed up. Uncle Ron wasn't one of them. Neither was Ava. Neither was my mother. I've had to grieve in a way. Not just the loss of a family I never truly had, but the version of me that kept waiting for their love to come wrapped in approval. I let that version die. I buried him with the guilt, the people-pleasing, the endless ache for validation. Now I'm truly living. I started writing again, something I hadn't done since high school. I launched a small freelance business. Maya and I are closer than ever. And every so often, someone reaches out. Someone who saw what happened, who recognized their own family in my story, who says, "Thank you for saying something. I felt this way for years." So if you're reading this and thinking about the family members who mock you, who use your love like a leash, who only call when they need something, listen to me. You don't have to stay in that house just because your name is on the mailbox. You don't owe anyone your silence to maintain a peace they never truly gave you. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand at the front door they slammed in your face, turn around and never look back. I didn't lose a family, I shed one. And in the quiet that followed, I finally heard my own voice again. Clear. Unapologetic.